Hello, I'm Margaret Barry, and I'm really pleased to be able to join you today for this first annual symposium of the Knowledge Development and Exchange Hub. I'm coming to you from my home in the west of Ireland and looking forward to the session. So let me bring up my slides so that we can start. Okay, so in this keynote presentation, I'm going to speak to the title of Child and Youth Mental Health Promotion in an International Context. And I'm going to cover two main areas. The first is I'm going to look at adopting a health promotion approach to child and youth mental health, looking at what that means and how it reframes the challenge of improving mental health and well-being in some quite significant ways. Then I will go on to look at the evidence base, looking at effective strategies for implementing mental health promotion and considering some of the challenges of mainstreaming effective interventions when working across diverse contexts and complex settings. So firstly, I think when we look at promoting child and youth mental health, it's important to say that mental health is a very critical component of youth health and well-being, and that when we promote mental health, it enables young people to grow and flourish, it builds resilience, and it also reduces the risk of poor mental health. For young people today, there are really unprecedented opportunities, but there are also quite significant challenges. And when we look at living in a very complex, interconnected world, and this requires a broad range of skills and supports for positive development. Looking particularly at mental health, the World Health Organization advocates a comprehensive public health approach. This means that while we need to provide the best and the most accessible treatment services for mental health problems, we also need to look at embracing promotion and prevention alongside treatment and recovery, because treatment approaches on their own are not sufficient to improve population mental health. So international policy frameworks such as the Global Mental Health Action Plan, they endorse this kind of comprehensive approach. They emphasize the essential role of mental health in achieving health for all, and they embrace a whole of government and a whole of society approach. And that means that we need to look at across government departments, not just that mental health department, in terms of improving mental health at a population level, and also across society, because there are many different sectors that have a role to play in protecting and promoting the well-being of all and ensuring that we leave no one behind. So when we talk about mainstreaming mental health promotion, then it's quite important that we see it as part of this whole of government, whole of society approach. And this type of framework is very much reflected in regional and national policies. At the UN level, for the first time, we have seen mental health explicitly referenced in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that was quite an important development. But when we look at Goal 3, which is explicitly about promoting good health and well-being for all at all ages, in Target 3.4, promoting mental health and well-being is explicitly in there for the first time. And this is an important recognition that mental health is a major contributor to health and sustainable development. And also indeed that the 17 goals are also contributors to mental health because they reflect many of the key determinants, looking at good quality education, gender equality, reducing inequalities, reducing hunger, ensuring that we have sustainable living environments in our cities and communities. So it's really placing mental health on a much broader platform. And I think in the context of the current pandemic, COVID-19 has very much highlighted, I think, the need for mental health promotion at a population-wide level, looking at the extent to which infectious diseases like COVID-19 have impacted, particularly on young people's mental health and well-being, and the fact that we need to address that at a population scale. And I think it's no coincidence that the UN World Youth Report for 2021 has an explicit focus on youth mental health and well-being. So again, a recognition by these agencies that youth mental health and well-being is a core consideration. So when we come to adopting a health promotion approach to mental health, this brings some very significant changes. It means we embrace a positive concept of mental health. It also means that we appreciate the universal relevance of mental health, because all of us have mental health needs. It's not just for those who experience mental health problems. It also means underpinning our actions with a social determinants of mental health approach, appreciating that many of the determinants of mental health lie in the social domain. And as a result of that, we need actions across sectors that will create the conditions for good mental health. It's not just an individual characteristic, it's also influenced by wider social and economic determinants. So this brings quite a significant paradigm change in thinking about mental health, because we're now focusing on positive mental health rather than solely on mental ill health. And we're also concerned with strategies for creating the greatest mental health gain for the greatest number of young people, not just those young people who are at the sharp end, who need immediate services, but also how do we keep the larger population of young people mentally healthy, and really keep them out of our services and make sure that they can thrive. This means we have to make a significant shift from a deficit model of illness to the health potential of young people and the health potential of the everyday settings where they live their lives. So this brings a significant reframing of how we approach improving child and youth mental health. So embracing a positive concept of mental health, we now have clear positive definitions of what mental health is, like this WHO definition here, bringing a clear focus on emotional and social well-being and the ability to realize our potential and abilities in the context of our everyday lives. The concept of positive mental health has been really developed in a clearer way by those from sociology, positive psychology, and the science of well-being. Kind of really illustrating that we need to look at subjective well-being, but also positive functioning, engagement, and social well-being. So Corey Key's concept of flourishing captures this broader understanding of mental health, because it looks at the kind of holistic development, the ability of young people to develop psychologically, physically, emotionally, intellectually, socially, and spiritually. And of course, the fact that all of these are very much interconnected. We've also seen an increased recognition of the importance of the social and emotional well-being of young people, recognised as a key asset and a resource for positive youth development. And it's also recognised that good social and emotional skills are really important for positive outcomes in school, in work, and in life more generally. And it's interesting to see that appreciation being sort of put forward by organisations like the OECD, recognising that in fact the social and emotional well-being of young people is really critical for their future development. A life course approach also emphasises the fact that if we want to look at positive mental health across the life cycle, that the foundations are laid in the early years, and then we have to look at the cumulative effects. So we need to start early and build in a cumulative way across the life course. The other thing from a social and emotional well-being point of view, and from a particularly a health promotion point of view, is that we need to create supportive environments for optimal development. That's really important. It's not just the individual's skills and competencies, but it is also to look at the fact that mental health and well-being is created where we live our lives, in our homes, in our schools, in our communities, and how can we make those settings much more mental health promoting so that they will enable young people to grow and have positive development. So this social determinants of mental health report from the WHO and the Toulouse-Gulbenkian Foundation was published in 2014, but it actually is quite a good report in illustrating what a determinants of mental health approach looks like. One of its key messages is that mental health and many of the common mental health problems and disorders that we all know, that these are shaped to a great extent by the social, economic, and physical environments in which people live. So it isn't just down to kind of individual factors, it's also around our daily living conditions, the broader social factors that influence our mental health. And Sir Michael Marmot and his team who worked on this report, I mean, they talk about not only addressing the causes, but addressing the causes of the causes. And that means we need this comprehensive whole of government, whole of society approach where universal actions across the life course can be implemented, working in partnership with different sectors and at different levels. And this is essentially what we mean when we talk about adopting an upstream approach to mental health promotion, because it means that we look at the importance of policy making at all levels of governance and across sectors, because this can make a really significant and positive difference to mental health outcomes. So that social determinants approach, then when we look at that in the context of a mental health promotion, it means that we work at these different levels. We work from the kind of downstream and upstream in an integrated way. So we look at strengthening individuals and young people and their families, promoting social and emotional skills, resilience, coping strategies, relationship skills, etc. We then look also at strengthening communities, looking at bolstering levels of social support, a greater sense of connectedness and social inclusion. So that means that, you know, young people have the capacity and have the opportunity for social participation and can engage as you know, in civil society and develop as full citizens. Reorienting health services to mental health promotion and prevention are also key, so that, you know, as well as providing treatment and recovery services, that promotion and prevention are also universally available, that they are there for all young people. And finally, then we move up to the removing the structural barriers to mental health at that broader society level. So at the structural level, looking at cultural factors, economic and social policies that can really make a positive difference for mental health. So we talk about a mental health in all policies approach. And this little figure on the side here shows that we can look at young people in the context of their families and their schools, and then onto their communities, then working out to the broader layers of this, you know, we talk about a socio-ecological approach, and all of these layers are interconnected. So we go to the social and economic context, political context, and then of course the importance of the natural environment. And the young people are in the center of this, but all of these influences kind of integrate to really can make a significant difference. So from a health promotion framework point of view, we adopt this very same socio-ecological model, and this is based on the Ottawa Charter. So it looks at the process of enabling people to increase control over their health and the determinants of health. And that's based on a systems approach. So very much like that Bronfenbrenner model of human development, here this looks at it from a systems perspective, that we need to look at the individual and the person in the context of their community, in the context of how services are organized, how the environments in which people live and the extent to which they are supportive of their mental health. And then also finally, the kind of the policies, the social policies that exist, of course, that are important in framing and creating those environments and those services. And we say from a health promotion perspective that we need to have integrated action across all these levels, from the micro to the macro, or from, you know, downstream to upstream. And the key thing is that they are interconnected. So the more integrated the actions are, the more impact that will be attained, and the more significant change at a broad level can actually be sustained. So we can see as well then that they're underpinning principles in relation to empowerment and participation, and of course the importance of equity and social justice. So these underpin the fundamental framework. Looking at this then in the context of how mental health services are delivered, we can see that classically our services are concerned with treatment in terms of case identification and providing adequate treatment. This is so important, and there's a huge need for this. And then we also look at aftercare, including rehabilitation and recovery. But we also need to look at, before the case identification, to look at prevention, providing prevention interventions for those who are at higher risk by virtue of circumstances or life experiences. And that includes some universal prevention that all of us need, because all of us are going to be exposed to certain levels of stress and difficulties in the course of our lives. But we also look, if you like, underneath the waterline and say, well, look, people who don't have any symptoms, who are not at risk at the moment, how can we build up their competence and capacities, build up their resilience, so that we are all in a better position to promote our own well-being, to protect our good mental health, and to be in a better position to tackle the stresses and the various challenges that we will meet along the way. So based on kind of supportive environments and empowerment. So this is where mental health promotion sits in relation to prevention, treatment, and maintenance. Okay, so now moving on then from those kind of concepts to look at the evidence in terms of what works. So here I'm going to take you through some evidence-based strategies that have from the literature, particularly the international literature, showing that what can be implemented and sustained at a reasonable cost while generating clear health and social gains. We also, many of these are underpinned by a life course approach, looking at policies and interventions from infancy right up to older age, and the different actions that can be delivered across different settings and delivery platforms. So I think it's important when we look at the evidence that I suppose, consider those interventions for which there's not only evidence of their effectiveness and their cost effectiveness, but also in terms of their feasibility, that they can be applied and that they're culturally acceptable, and that there is capacity within the existing systems to implement them. That's an important, not only that it works, but it actually is feasible to make this work in the local context, because that's really going to make the difference in terms of translation and diffusion. So here we have worked in our centre with the WHO and other international agencies and governments around producing evidence synthesis and briefings based on the international evidence from high, middle and low income countries. So here are just some of the reports here from the WHO European region, from the Eastern Mediterranean region, and these cover and also internationally reports for the World Bank and others, and they bring together evidence from across high resource and low resource settings. And that's important because we need to know that if we have effective approaches, that they can work in low resource settings, because that's often where they're needed most. And in the Implementing Mental Health Promotion book, we published the second edition last year. And in that, we bring together a lot of these findings, but also importantly, we bring together case studies from people who've been, leading authors who've been involved in developing these interventions and implementing them over years, sometimes 20, 30 years. And they share their perspectives around what makes for successful implementation of these evidence-based approaches, including scaling them up at a national level. And of course, that's a critical consideration. Here then are some evidence syntheses looking particularly in childhood and adolescence, looking at schools and also the out of school context, including online, and a recent project that we're involved with at the European level, looking at promoting positive mental health in the youth sector, which is again a very important setting for young people and the promotion of mental health. So if we were to make an overall conclusion, I think, from reviewing all this evidence, we can see that there is now fairly compelling evidence internationally that when we promote mental health, it leads to lasting benefits for young people, their families, and indeed for society. The evidence shows that mental health promotion interventions, when they're well implemented, that they can enhance protective factors for good mental health and well-being. They reduce the risk factors for mental and behavioural disorders, and they can also lead to lasting positive effects on a range of other social and economic outcomes, including young people doing better in school, going on to do better in life and to be employed, to have better social functioning and better overall health and well-being. So these are quite important, significant outcomes from these interventions. We also have convincing social and economic case for investing in the promotion of child and youth mental health and well-being, showing that when we invest in these interventions and looking at the cost of doing that, that the returns both in financially and to society are quite significant, so that there's a good health economics argument for also doing this, and that's important when we're talking to the policymakers. So I want to look now at, starting in the early years, to look at some of the evidence and some of the issues that arise regarding implementation. So starting right at the beginning, if we look at promoting infant and maternal mental health for 0 to 3 years, there are a number of interventions now that look at integrating positive mental health and a focus on social and emotional development of the child into routine prenatal and postnatal care services and home visiting and parenting programs. And most of these interventions, they're usually home visiting and parenting programs. They could be universal, they're kind of programs that are provided to all parents, and some then are more targeted. But the majority have an empowering and a strengths-based approach, and that's a key thing about the promoting positive mental health. And the targeted programs try to reach out to those women and children that are at higher risk, be that teenage parents or mothers that are at risk of intimate partner violence or at a risk of postnatal depression. The evidence base internationally is quite robust about the positive impact of these programs, and indeed their long-term positive outcomes, because they lead to improved child development and parenting skills and reducing problems for the children down the line. But they also improve the maternal mental health and social functioning. And there's a good economic case, because the benefit to cost ratio is as high as 23 to 1, meaning that for every dollar that's put in, there's a $23 return. And very importantly, there's also strong evidence that those children and their mothers who are most at risk make the most gains. There are many examples of evidence-based programs that have been running for a number of years and have been implemented in many different countries, like the Nurse Family Partnership, the Community Mothers Programme from Ireland, the Fulani Mothers from South Africa, and indeed I put in here the Flourishing Families Programme, which has been developed in Manitoba in Canada, and in the UK we have Sure Start. And these are kind of large-scale initiatives, and these programs are delivered in some case by trained health professionals like nurses, and in other case they're by trained community workers or community mothers. So again, looking at the fact that they are kind of quite cost-effective approaches. The key around implementation appears to be the extent to which they can be integrated into mainstream services, so that they are scaled up and that there is policy support to ensure that this service is made available to families, that there is workforce training, that the people delivering the interventions are trained up appropriately. You're looking at a kind of strengths-based empowering approach, good training around that, and also that they reach those higher risk families and to ensure that the support provided is proportionate to need. So very strong evidence coming for those programs. Next, we look at preschool education, promoting child mental health development for those aged 3 to 6. And again, evidence here that access to high quality preschool programs can really develop children's social and emotional well-being alongside their cognitive skills and their readiness for school. So that not only do they do better when they go to school, but they also are developing the social and emotional skills that are needed to engage and to develop themselves as well. The focus here is on structured curriculum-based approaches, child-initiated activities, strong supportive educational environment, and linking back into the family environment also, like with parent support. That seems to be a key component for the most effective approaches. We have quite strong international evidence base for the long-term positive outcomes from these high-quality programs, where we see improved school performance, and later children from the longitudinal studies, children go on to have better employment, better jobs, greater benefits, particularly for those at higher risk and the most disadvantaged children. So these preschool programs are seen as having an important role to play in reducing inequities due to child poverty and poor health. And of course, that's very important. And there's a very, again, strong kind of case from an economic point of view for investing in these interventions with a benefit to cost ratio of 17.6 to 1. So again, long-standing example here would be the Head Start program, which is now being combined with the high scope preschool program called Head Start Ready. But there are many examples of these programs in different countries, but these seems to be the key element. Again, a supportive policy on preschool education is crucial if we want to scale this up, as is workforce training for those working in the preschool setting, because if it's going to be mainstreamed, then they all need to be in a good position to deliver this with high quality. Then we look at supporting families beyond the age of the early years, looking from 3 up to 16 years, up to teenage years for school-going children. And here, the importance of access to both universal and targeted parenting and family strengthening programs that will promote the emotional well-being and the behavioural functioning of young people. And so they seek to equip parents in kind of good communication skills, developing positive relationships and positive social behaviours in their children. So there is a strong evidence base of positive outcomes, particularly in relation to childhood conduct disorders. And so many of these programs have been found to reduce child abuse and neglect, reduce emotional problems, and also reduce psychological distress in both the children and the parents. And the targeted programs in particular have shown a good benefit to cost ratio of 8:1. So the benefits here, particularly in relation to reducing antisocial behavior and also reducing crime. So you can see there that there's a lot of benefits here to not only the health sector, but also into justice and education and other sectors. Again, there are examples of these programs here, like the Triple P parenting program from New Zealand, the Incredible Years program from Stratton and others. And these have again been replicated across numerous countries to date. From an implementation point of view, again, if these programs are delivered in the context of supportive policies and family support, then there's a better chance of these being scaled up and mainstreamed. Likewise, if there's training provided to staff to engage with these programs and implement them effectively. And both Triple P and Incredible Years, they're very much multi-component programs. So you can have kind of a basic, short-term basic program, but then you can have a more advanced program, a longer program, and also programs that are targeted to different needs, to maybe children with particular difficulties. And also with Triple P, that program is now also delivered online. So there's a wide range of application and very good evidence in relation to these. Next, we come to the school setting, which of course is quite an important one. And here, promoting young people's social and emotional skills and resilience, particularly through whole school interventions, is what comes through from the literature as being the most effective approach. Here, the importance of access to universal social and emotional learning programs is quite important, and that they are done in a whole school approach, so that it's not only what's taught in the curriculum, but you also look at the school environment, and you look at the school policies, and you look at how the school links in with the wider community and the parents, so that the social and emotional learning and the skills related to that are taught in a very coordinated and sequenced way within that larger context. We have very strong international evidence here about the positive impact of these social and emotional learning programs for a very diverse range of young people from different countries. We can see that when social and emotional learning is provided in schools, that it improves their academic engagement and performance, although the evidence for that is mainly coming from the US. We don't have a wide body of evidence on that yet. Also, that it leads to enhanced positive social behaviours, reducing aggression and bullying, stress and depression, and also that's quite important from an educational point of view, that it can have those positive impacts. We also have a range of more targeted interventions for those young people in school who have higher needs, reducing depression, anxiety, and also looking at suicidal behaviours. And again, these programs have been found to be a good economic investment. They can be delivered by teachers who are adequately supported to do so, with a benefit to cost ratio ranging from 11:1 up to 25:1. For the more high quality programs. So again, the benefits here are not only to the health sector, but they're to the education sector and to the employment sector. So again, this kind of intersectoral approach and also the co-benefits, is important to emphasize that, but it's a good investment here. There are a wide range of programs here, and I've highlighted some of these now, that are programs that have a whole school approach, like Positive Action and Kids Matter in Australia. And I'm sure that you're aware of a number of programs also in Canada, and I haven't put these up here. Kiva, an anti-bullying program from Finland. But the implementation point of view, tiered delivery seems to be quite important within a whole school approach, so that you have programs for all, programs for some children who have higher needs, and then for a small number of children, they will need quite high levels of support. So you need to have universal and targeted interventions that can, and then maybe specialist treatment approaches that are needed. So that tiered approach is important. But for these programs to be successful and to be sustained, they need to be embedded in educational policy. And that means that there needs to be training and support for teachers to provide these programs in a high quality way so that they really become part of the core business of the school. We have been working for a number of years with the school sector in Ireland, where we have the Department of Education has introduced a well-being framework, which is a kind of now a compulsory framework for schools. And we've been developing resources in partnership with education and with the health service. Mind Out is an example of one of those we've been developing for adolescents. But I mention it because Katie Dowling, working with me, did a large-scale randomized controlled trial in disadvantaged schools, looking at them. We got some really nice positive outcomes for young people in terms of improving their social and emotional skills and reducing their risk for mental health, like depression and stress. But what we also found was that if the program is not implemented to high quality, those positive outcomes will disappear. They will not benefit the young people. So really supporting teachers in implementing this in a high quality way is absolutely critical in order for the positive outcomes to be achieved. And that's a key kind of point I think I want to make about having the best evidence-based approach. If it's not underpinned by high quality implementation, we will not see positive outcomes. So moving from the school then into the wider community setting, there are other ways in which we can promote youth social and emotional well-being. And that is through kind of youth empowerment programs. And like, okay, they can be promoted in the classroom through social and emotional learning, but we can also use other innovative approaches like creative arts, drama, music, sports. And there's a range of interventions out there, especially for young people who are disadvantaged or socially excluded. Mentoring and social action programs for at-risk young people. And again, the international evidence here, it's not as strong as for schools, but it is promising that these community-based interventions can make a positive difference, especially for youth in deprived communities. And that's an important group of young people to be able to make a difference for. However, from the evidence point of view, there is a need for more comprehensive evaluations because we have very innovative interventions, but often the evaluations are not as strong as they need to be to show the positive outcomes. And so I've just included some examples there, like the Big Brothers Big Sisters mentoring program, the Youth Social Action program in the UK, and Project K program in New Zealand. I've just mentioned just some. And then we move then to, of course, a virtual setting, I think, for youth mental health promotion, which are online technologies, the internet and social media. And this is definitely, particularly in the current context, a very important delivery platform for young people. And we have seen the development of online interventions to support life skills and competencies. Now, online delivery is being used increasingly in relation to treatment programs and prevention programs, but I suppose there's been less of a focus around mental health promotion. We did a review a couple of years ago, a systematic review of online interventions that had that positive mental health approach for young people. And we found that there was a number of kind of apps and online gaming programs, mobile phone interventions, blogging and online support out there, including some structured programs. But what we did find from that review is that there's quite a high dropout rate from these online interventions, and often it is those young people who are most vulnerable that are most likely to drop out. So that's a significant consideration. So we have to look at how can we implement these so that we optimize the benefits of these online interventions. And so we have, been looking at that in relation to the youth sector, looking at that particular setting for how these can be integrated where there is some support from youth workers as well as the standalone online intervention. But I think looking at mental health literacy and how it can be increased, but also in relation to the people who work with young people, like the teachers, the parents, the youth workers, digital literacy is quite important so that they are comfortable and can support young people around the effective use of these online interventions. Okay, so there I've gone through some examples in different settings, different delivery platforms, but we can see that the international evidence supports the fact that mental health promotion interventions can promote young people's social and emotional well-being, and they provide them with the skills for positive youth development, and that also that these skills are actually fundamental to reducing a range of kind of negative behaviors like substance misuse, antisocial behavior, and other risky health and sexual behaviors. The evidence reviews also support the fact that we need comprehensive approaches. So the once-off or the short-term project, it can demonstrate what can be done, but we need to make sure that we can look at how that can be integrated and mainstreamed. And also the evidence reviews show that we need to create supportive environments. So that's be family environments in the home, school environments, community and digital environments that can really both provide universal and targeted interventions that cater for the needs of all young people. So that's, I think it's important that it's not only the skills, it's also the supportive environments. We need both elements, and we need that to be implemented in quite an integrated way. So in implementing evidence-based approaches, I just want to finish with some kind of concluding comments on that we have a lot of evidence, we have a lot of interventions internationally, but actually translating those into mainstream practice is quite challenging. Looking at how we can scale those up and sustain them for different groups of young people in different settings and across different health systems, we need to know more about how we can bridge what I call the no-do gap. We might know what we need to do, but how can we actually implement that and translate it into practice on the ground? So few interventions are fully implemented or scaled up at a country level. And this is our challenge. Like, we've got a lot of the evidence, but how can we scale it up now and make it universally available? We also have kind of lacking information about how different sociocultural contexts influence implementation and influence sustainability when we're dealing, working across different country settings, different high and low resource settings. And that is important that we fill that gap. So guidance and support is very much needed for effective implementation in the local context. And that means we need to build up and advocate for supportive policy, supportive implementation strategies, and also, very importantly, workforce capacity, that we have the people on the ground who can work to implement these interventions. So in bridging the implementation gap, we need to be very mindful of context, working in the local context. What is the potential there for mainstreaming it into standard practice? So taking into account all the messiness of real life conditions, the fact that we've got very diverse socioeconomic groups, different cultural contexts and settings, these evidence-based interventions need to be able to work in those conditions. And for that, we need skilled practitioners, but we also need enabling practice contexts, so that there is a mechanism and a structure to allow these to be implemented to a high quality. We need to make sure that we use the best evidence to guide priority actions. So like, what's the most effective, start with what's the most effective evidence-based strategy, and then look to see, well, how can I make this work in my local context? So that means a concern with process. Because the interventions have to engage the end users. They've got to be user-friendly, they've got to be culturally appropriate, and they've got to be feasible to be implemented in the local setting. So we've got to look at how we can tailor these approaches. And for that, stakeholder engagement is critical. We need to engage young people, we need to engage implementers, because they have the knowledge to tell us what is feasible, what will work for them, and what's going to be relevant. And we need to kind of work off the evidence, but also work off of that knowledge base to ensure that we have successful implementation. Never lose sight of the importance of equity, and to make sure that the interventions, that they will reduce inequities and not widen them. So that means we've got to purposefully design interventions that will work with diverse population groups of young people at different ages, gender, ethnicity, culture, education, and income status. And we need to know more about what works for different groups of young people. So looking at the equity impact and keeping a clear focus on that. And finally, there's a strong need for implementation guidance and support, so that the intervention can be put into practice to a high quality. That's really important. The resources, the training, the technical assistance. So we don't just train people and send them off, that we need to be there to support the implementation, to look at the barriers, to look at how the challenges can be overcome. So that means having the organizational capacity to support implementation, and also that there is a systems support for change, and that the system is there kind of in a supportive way to ensure that there are good outcomes. So in conclusion then, I think for the successful implementation of evidence-based child and youth mental health promotion, we need supportive policies, practices and research to make sure that they can be implemented to a high quality and that they can be sustained. And that means having enabling policy structures at all levels of governance and across sectors, so that there is policy that will make a positive difference to child and youth mental health. That includes housing, it includes education, justice, welfare, all of culture, media, all of these sectors have a key role to play. From a practice point of view, we need skilled practitioners who can implement what we know works in improving young people's mental health and well-being, especially in low resource settings, maximizing their reach and impact. So that equity element is crucial. And we also need research that will support effective implementation and scaling up. A lot of the research is focused on showing efficacy or effectiveness, but we now need to have a lot more focus on systematic implementation research, including that large scale up at a national level, and what is needed to make that effective. So I would end by calling for the fact that we need to invest in mainstreaming mental health promotion policies and practices that will create supportive environments that empower young people, that will enhance their skill development and enable them to grow and flourish. So thank you very much for your attention. And I just leave you with that last slide there, saying that we need to make sure that the conditions that create and promote children and youth mental health and well-being, that they are accessible to all. Thank you very much.